For disclaimer. Folks, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is I had to use Reddit. The good news is we have video content now. So I basically stumbled upon this post where it basically goes,
Clamping Beyblade burst! They sure had a lot of ways to stop bees from bursting.
They basically say that this was the true downfall of burst, and probably the main reason by the end of the competitive scene it was just stamina spin steel battles. Like, why did they add so many ways to stop bees from bursting while also making them heavier and heavier? So there's a lot of things wrong with this for the reasoning and just general look. I don't really care who the OP is, whatever. I'm just more looking at just the conversation itself, so obviously don't attack or whatever. But before I continue with this video, mallofbays.com, haha. We have, I think there might be some UX stuff left over, and we'll only be restocking probably a little bit later on. But we have other Beyblade Burst stuff still in our store, huh? See, that's how we connect the Beyblade Burst promo. It's an optional way to support the channel. I appreciate any support regardless. Let's go over in a case by case. Our first case is going to be dash drivers. Now, dash drivers are just tighter versions of the regular drivers. They have a golden spring and a red cap. Obviously, since you're twisting and locking the bays, they obviously have a stronger lock to them. Now, my idea with dash drivers is just, I think it makes sense if it's for attack type bays, because one of the biggest faults of burst system is that attack types should never have weak resistance at all. It kind of is redundant if you give them weak resistance. That's why I prefer Beyblade X, where they handle the burst system by quite a bit, for how they understood how the game balancing should work. But, you know, if you even look at beyond, let's say, just attack dash drivers, which I have no issue with at all, because you need that for the attack types that lose a lot of clicks from the strong impact or the recoil that they generate. But majority of the dash drivers, if you look at it through like cho-z, let's see all the dash drivers. Okay, let's see then after GT, all those dash drivers. Okay, let's after see sparking. Okay, now we saw spark. Now let's see DB/BU. Majority of the choices are dog shit. It's not really like any of them had that much of an effect. Like, even on the ones that are, like for an example, Zone Dash, where you would use the +Z attachment, and obviously that was primarily just for equalizing. But, you know, even then, even if you had it where it was regular zone, more or less, you'd probably get the same results for winning, and I don't really think much would change in that regard for the era that it was released. Even if you want to argue Hasbro's +Z attachment, which works for both opposite and same spin stamina, even like high extend plus dash, the driver is fodder for attack. It's easy to KO and kill, so it's not really like the game is being that much hurt by it. So that's why I'm crossing out dash drivers. It doesn't make any sense to say. You can't even say metal drivers. Metal drivers are essentially where they give them a metal cap. Those have shittier resistance than a regular driver, and it's more easier to burst them. So in both cases of a dash driver and a metal driver, I think both of these are completely not valid at all. So now that we've kind of debunk this whole thing of now, oh, well, dash drivers though, because they prevent bursting, whatever, which we're gonna move on to the next portion of it. We're gonna go era by era, what had burst resistance, did it negatively affect or not. So next up is the cho-z awakening system. So, I mean, this system, you do a strong shoot and burst stoppers come out. cho-z Achilles and cho-z Valkyrie, we don't even need to address them, because they're both really used primarily for attack combinations. It's not really like they were really used in the meta for really that much stamina use. So I don't really think you can argue that they negatively affected the game or had some sort of bad effect to it. It's not like it forced the meta to be one way or something like that. Even cho-z Spriggan, cho-z Spriggan, I'm not gonna lie to you, was kind of mid. It's only high up in even my tier list because you only used it on the bearing driver, and even then, Spriggan Requiem is a better equalizer than cho-z Spriggan, right? Well, it's not even like cho-z Spriggan, funny enough, was that scary. Solid, but it wasn't something that really, I think, pushed the game to a negative way. Now, let's move on to the GT era. What do you have examples for the GT? The Gen layer weight is a rubber layer weight that replaces the metal weight that you have for a rubber stopper. The resistance is increased, but the issue is that since there's no weight at all, it's shit. Doesn't really matter, even if they can't burst with it, just more of a nerf than anything. Okay, then after, what about bays like Judgment Joker, because it has a rubber burst stopper? Oh, that's just to prevent the recoil from killing itself, and it's mostly used for attack stuff, so that's negated. That doesn't matter. Okay, Lord Spriggan. Lord Spriggan has little plastic stoppers. Okay, now this is the one where you can maybe kind of argue a little bit, but even in the case of Lord, right? If you even look at like most of the GT era, this isn't even really a Lord thing. Like, if you move from the Gen layer weight and you hit like Lord Spriggan, you'll think, oh, well, Lord Spriggan, come on, it has a little plastic stop. I'm gonna actually tell you something about the GT meta. This isn't a Lord problem at all. The bays in general for the GT era, you very rarely saw bursts. In fact, the complaint of no bursts at all started in the GT era. Because primarily, if you look at GT's gameplay, most of the time, the bays just kill each other before they can lose enough clicks to burst them. It was still possible, but it wasn't really like this big factor that it was this one particular thing that negatively affected. Like, Master doesn't have burst stoppers, but you don't really see Master bursting that much in GT era. So it's, and Lord, you know, a Judgment could probably KO it and take it out. But, you know, even then, when they're citing the infinite lock bay, the infinite lock bays are actually mid. They basically are this thing where you lock it together and it basically freely rotates around, and only if you hit at a certain spot when you push on the thing, they'll burst. There actually would have been a lot better, all of them, if they never had the infinite lock system. That system literally does nothing for it. It's not for stamina, not for anything relevant during that era. They just kind of like freeze in static when they do any big hits or whatever. Like, they kind of like buffer a bit. But again, you can see another case where it's like, okay, the GT era, it's like we're already getting to this point because the bays of how fast they kill each other, it's not really like there was that much bursting in that thing. And the infinite lock bays are not really a good example. Okay, so then after, well, the sparking era is where the criticism of bursting, no bursting, or the fact they can't burst is maybe where it's the most valid, because sparking bays had a double chassis system. And in this system, it's almost impossible to burst a double chassis bay because the clicks required are not really possible. It's very well designed, don't get me wrong. But even in the case of double chassis stuff, like, I'm pretty sure if you look at a lot of the stuff that kind of aged throughout, at most you could say, you know, when we had to use things like Tempest on a 2-way double chassis for stamina, but even then that was outclassed by a 1S wheel combination. Even some of that meta, like from a lot of the combos, I don't know how true that is, because even things like 2S, they'd actually give shitty teeth to, so that means it would be a little bit easier to burst it. But I'll say, at least the sparking era, you can at least say that criticism kind of makes sense. Actually, you want to know what? If we talk about DB and BU, I would argue it feels like there were more bursts during that era than GT, and for sure sparking, because you had things like Guilty and a lot more options and heavy hitters that could probably like burst stuff. So I think it's actually a little bit ironic that era of the end is where you kind of saw it quite a bit. But let's go over the stuff that, you know, I mean, there's the BU lock stuff, but none of that was really relevant towards anything that was like towards like crippling stamina problems or whatever. There's the Belial cores, which each of them have a burst stopper. Most of them are used on the attack combinations. True, some were used on the stamina combinations, but again, I feel like when we're kind of viewing all of this sort of why are they making a gimmick where the bays don't burst? One, marketing. Two, it's not, you have to look at, But even if we view the cores of D, B, and B, like even if we view the Belial cores with the burst stoppers or the Kerbeus and the Bahamut ones, I think in reality, because attack is a lot stronger by the end of it, you kind of need them. Otherwise, like the balance even gets a little bit weird in that regard, and that's a lot harder to kind of explain because you have guilty, so the left base kind of need good resistance in order to even survive that. But even in all of this, the issue is not really even dash drivers. The issue is not the burst prevention systems. In reality, even the life after death drivers, even if you look at that actually, like your bearings, bearing drift, drip, blah, 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 blah. Even if you look at all this life after death stuff, all this strong stamina stuff, but the issue with that is not that they exist, it's that there's no balance to kill them. The base becomes so heavy that it almost, it forces the meta to be centralized on them, because bearing drift, if you look at like wind BDR, it's a pretty tough option because of the ground that it can cover. But if you take BDR and you throw it into the GT era, where the weight's a lot less and it's a little bit different, suddenly BDR is not really that much of an issue. Even a lot of this LAD stuff, it's not really that much of an issue. So a lot of this is more, I don't think it's any of the things mentioned. A lot of like the stuff that could not burst weren't really that much of an issue. Sparking maybe. The LAD drivers you can say were annoying, but really it just comes down to weight, because weight's what makes the LAD drivers as strong as they can possibly be, right? The harder to knock out, the more annoying it is. But I don't even think I have that much of an issue generally with stamina, even equalizers. I think it's kind of boring to watch, but I don't really think it's bad to have it in the gameplay. I don't think that. I think the issue is that you need to have a balance where the bays aren't so heavy, so the power level of an equalizer isn't that strong. With all that being said, there are many things you can criticize Burst for. This thing, not one of them. And I'm being completely fair to the Burst meta. Even if I like Beyblade X a lot more for the system design, for gameplay, whatever, I can't sit here and slander the Burst generation. I simply cannot, because the options there did not really kind of hurt it. Maybe some LAD stuff kind of got annoying, but that's again just more of an issue with just the general weights than it was necessarily, per se, just the meta options, generally. Yeah, but that's about it. I enjoyed this quite a bit. Alright, that's about it for this video. For the Burst fans, I have your back. Listen, I played the game for many, many years competitive, so I know exactly what made the game shit and what didn't. I have a pretty good idea. And that'll be it for now. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful day, and bye.